Hey there, press fans. Coming from Altman Studios in downtown Brentwood, right into your ears wherever you are, this is Clocked In with the Press, the podcast where we highlight news stories, individuals, and organizations in the community that deserve your attention. To stay updated on the latest Contra Costa County happenings, you can do so through our website at www.thepress.net or on our Twitter and Instagram at PressClockedIn. I'm your host, Jake Menez. Today, we're clocking in with Brentwood City Manager Tim Ogden for a conversation about what a city manager's role is in local government. How you doing, Tim?
Great, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. So let's start pretty broad and we'll kind of zoom in. So for anybody at home who doesn't really know a lot about local government, what is a city manager's job?
It's a big job. So I work directly for the mayor and the city council and oversee all of the operations of the city. I have a lot of help, obviously, with our 350 plus employees. I have a great executive team that each manage a different department, different scope of work. And I just check in and make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and we're serving the residents as they expect.
And so on a typical day in the life, you get to work and sort of what happens then?
Typical day, there's not a typical day. So it is whatever the hot topic of the day is usually. It is a series of meetings throughout the day with directors, with project managers, with residents, with council members. It is a series of hundreds of emails throughout the day and delegating and making decisions all day long. So I don't know, I probably make 100 different decisions throughout the day of different executive decisions. So there's a lot of variety and every day is a little bit different.
And so is that one of the things you like about the job is kind of that it's not stagnant, it does have that variety to it?
There is an attraction to that variety that makes it interesting. It's solving problems, it's working through different issues that pop up, and probably, easily a third of the day is not what's planned. And so responding to that and being as quick about it as possible.
So if you don't mind me asking, what's one thing that came up, this week that's kind of impromptu that you had to, it's Monday, I'm saying this week, but recently it's kind of an impromptu thing.
This week, so today, just in the first couple hours, let's see, there was a human resource case I had to review. There was some more media attention about a recent lawsuit about a canine bite from 2 years ago. Had to work through. Responded to a couple emails from the council and from residents. Had 2 different meetings with some staff about some different issues as well. So a little bit of variety, and I had 4 different things planned on my task list today that I've not yet gotten to.
So just hit the ground running, oh my God.
Absolutely. But it's just reprioritizing every day to meet the needs of whatever the issue is.
That's perfect. And so we're at the end of February here, so you're coming up on 2 years, or you've just hit 2 years with the city.
Hit 2 years, first week of February.
Perfect. And before this, you were in Manteca most recently?
I was in Manteca for about 2.5 years as city manager and did some exciting projects there and had a great time. And before that, I was in Waterford as the city manager for 6.5 years. And it was a small city with lots of big projects and had a blast there. And I've been in governments almost coming up on 20 years now total, including the city of Modesto as well in that mix.
So I'm going to ask a hardball question here. Why Brentwood? What attracted you to come to Brentwood after Manteca?
Oh, Brentwood has been on the list of a city I've kind of eyed for a few years, waiting for an opportunity to come here. It's just well-managed, beautiful city. They got the trails and the open space. They've also got quite a few interesting economic development things in play. One of the opportunities I should say I had was watching what was happening with the Great Wolf Lodge that was looking at Brentwood initially about 4 years ago. And they also came knocking on Manteca's doors. And so I drove out to Brentwood to see why is Brentwood even on their list and why isn't it Manteca? And so that was, again, another exposure to Brentwood saying, wow, they're in a good spot. They've got a lot of things happening. They're moving in the right direction. So when the opportunity came open with the previous city manager's retirement, I threw my hat in the ring and thankfully was hired. And it's been quite a ride, enjoying it every day. It's a new challenge, new opportunity, and we've got a bright future ahead of us.
So before we get to the future, let's talk about the past 2 years. What's one project you've been involved in that when I ask what's your favorite project, what comes to mind?
Favorite.
Or even the most challenging.
You might have heard about this pandemic called COVID. That consumed me within 5 weeks of being on the job and had an exciting budget in front of us, a strategic plan the council just approved. And within 5 weeks, I was shutting down City Hall. I was immediately going into crisis mode with the finance department and saying, okay, we've got to review the budget quickly. Things are in chaos. All of the strategic plan initiatives the council just approved, we said put them all on hold until we figure out what the budget implications are going to be. And I was still trying to feel my way around City Hall to figure out who is everybody here and what are we even doing, and immediately turned it all upside down and working remotely. And it was definitely the biggest challenge of my career in 20 years. If I hadn't been new, it might have been a little different because I would have had all those relationships with the community, the council, the staff. And being new, it just threw a curveball. But we've just had a great team working through all the different roller coaster of the issues through the last 2 years. That has definitely been one of the biggest challenges, for sure.
Yeah, just a total trial by fire.
So I think a favorite outcome has been working very closely with the East Contra Costa Fire Protection District and several different initiatives with them over the last 2 years, trying to figure out how do we get them better funded, how do we increase the service response of their timeliness for medical and fire issues, and had to fend off a couple initiatives where maybe we were going to give millions of dollars directly to the district, but in the end helped support an effort where they were able to obtain Measure X funding from the county through their sales tax measure, as well as start ramping up on new apparatus and even opening up the station in Oakley that services Brentwood as well with some of those funds. And now this consolidation that's underway, and that should be in place, I think, June, July timeframe. So that's been my favorite outcome so far. And obviously the Innovation Center, I think you talked about a little bit 2 weeks ago on your podcast, some great initiatives happening there, and that really will be a game changer for this community. We've got quite a few of our employees of residents commuting, and so the more we can bring great, well-paying jobs to this community, the less they have to spend time on the roads. So that's definitely the objective.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Yeah, if you want to recap a little bit for people who maybe didn't hear that episode.
Sure. So as you just recently had a podcast talking about, we have been working with the property owners in about a 400 acre location of several different properties that we've been planning for a future business park, and also had included family resource. Obviously, that was where the Great Wolf Lodge maybe had been considered. And then also some high-density residential to support transit and transportation corridors. So that is all still in movement. We just had one of our big developments come into there, and that's the Amber Lane Apartments, and that was planned for, as well as Costco has announced coming to Brentwood. So that'll be our first major commercial prospect siting in the Innovation Center project property. And they're going to go through the planning process now, and could be built and ready in the next year and a half or so. But really, the intent is to create a job creation center and give our residents something closer to home.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I know before I came to the press, my previous job, I was commuting out to Pleasant Hill. So anything that reduces that commute for anybody, I think, is
absolutely
terrific.
Yeah. Now it's not going to happen overnight, but we'll incrementally put together little puzzle pieces of development out there. And one of the big misnomers that the community may not fully understand is the city doesn't own a single property out there. So we are having to make sure we have good relations with the property owners and the brokerage community, the commercial prospects as well, and making sure that they align their goals together and that they can put the deal together, and we help support that wherever we can. But it won't be overnight, so nobody should be dusting off the resume and planning to park the car permanently, but hopefully sooner than later.
So for now, Costco's still on Highway 4 there to get there?
Correct. So just on the north side of that vacant property south of that commercial center.
And so the so the Innovation Center, I assume, will be part of the strategic plan you guys are currently working on.
Correct.
I can give you the floor a little bit to talk about that some
Sure.
more.
Yes, so the City Council just last week approved a 2-year strategic plan, and there are about 25 different initiatives throughout this plan that will be the guiding policy document for us to put together all the budgets. So in April, we'll come back with a capital improvement project program, as well as the operating budget for council's approval, and then off and running July 1 with all the budgets in place, all the policy direction clear, and off and running on all of these different initiatives. So I'd be glad to highlight what some of those initiatives are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned Innovation Center. So one of the top, actually the very first project is to construct all the infrastructure that the city is taking the responsibility of. That's bringing in water and sewer access to the property so that when the master developer comes in, or we've got multiple developers coming in, they can immediately move forward on building their project, knowing they have the utilities that they're going to be critical. So the first big project that's already underway, and that's the Sand Creek Road extension. And we've got the right-of-way acquired from the property owner and working through the design now with an engineering firm to get that ready. And that could be under construction end of the year, first of next year. So that's an exciting project for sure.
So out of all the projects, you said 25 projects in here, right?
Approximately.
So out of all of those, which one would you say you're most looking forward to, and which one do you think you anticipate will be the biggest challenge, just kind of off the top of your head?
I can share from the council's perspective.
Yeah, perfect.
They were quite excited about moving forward on the Sand Creek Sports Complex. And that's an approximate $15 million project. We'll have artificial turf as well as natural grass, soccer fields, and maybe other sporting fields being accommodated. We have some of the money that came through the American Rescue Plan Act, as well as some developer-funded monies that were going towards that project over the last, 10-plus years, just not getting there fast enough to then hire a designer and get construction underway. But that's going to start taking place. We'll come back to the community probably end of the year and work with stakeholders and say, okay, again, how do you want to vision this now that we've got the money and the consulting expertise to help us bring it to fruition? So that's an exciting one. The Innovation Center one is obviously a favorite of mine because my background's more economic development, so to get to see the office developers and the commercial interest. And then one of the other projects that I know is very exciting for our Public Works Department is approximately $140 million worth of improvements to address some of the organics management. So that's everything you're throwing out in your trash can, any food waste that then creates methane and other issues for our environment, a way to better collect that and reuse it or divert it from the landfills. And that's the objective there. And then also expanding our water treatment storage and all that with droughts and the unpredictability of our water supply. We're actually in a pretty good location where we've got the right access to surface water, some well water, purchase water from the local agencies. And while we're still inviting our residents to conserve as much as possible, we are in a great geographic location that's more conducive to us.
Perfect. Let me take a second here. Excuse me. So, and as for any that you think are going to be more challenging on that list, was there one that jumps out at you?
Challenging? Well, one that I know the community's been looking forward to for some time is the amphitheater. And they've made some significant headway on the design during several community workshops in the last year. And now we're working on all the environmental review. It was last updated about 10 years ago, and lots of state laws have changed, making it a little more difficult to comply with their environmental regulations without updating our analysis of it. So that's underway, but that'll be a very exciting project for the community. We have a lot of interest by the council in various land use issues. So how do we conserve and protect our open space? Because that is an amenity that we enjoy out here, especially from the agricultural community. But also balance some of the state requirements to build more housing that not necessarily desirable, but have to accommodate as well based on these state laws. And so finding the right balance between protecting open space and planning for those housing projects that have to come through as well.
And for people who might not be in the know, so you said it's state required that there's more housing. So you want to talk a little bit about why that is?
Well, I think the legislators in Sacramento have tied together homeless issues as a housing issue, when maybe it's more complex than that. They are also concerned that the price of housing is the wages aren't keeping up with the cost of housing, and how do we build more housing and then the supply and demand equilibrium will balance out and provide more affordable options for our residents. So I think they're saying more housing is part of the answer. They have set certain requirements about how many housing units you have to build every year over a 5-year, 10-year period. They want to make sure that residents have options. So if you own a single-family home, they're now saying you can put an accessory dwelling unit in your backyard, or even come to the city and say under new laws, and one of the new legislations was Senate Bill 9, very controversial. It took away a lot of our autonomy here as cities and mandating a fix all when not all cities are the same. Some cities in the Central Valley would be very welcoming to SB9's impacts, but a city like Brentwood that's trying to protect some of that open space, it's not as desirable. So SB9 would create an opportunity where a single-family home can subdivide the lot and put up to 2 or 3 other units on there even. And you can see that's going to create some real density issues, some real traffic concerns for neighborhoods, change the character of our community in a lot of ways. But we'll check a box for what the state's looking for, more housing options as well.
That's the challenge. It's really not a one-size-fits-all approach.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
And so a big part of that, so I'm rewinding a little bit here. You kind of talked about aspects of the strategic plan the community is going to be excited about. So just speaking more about community involvement, how can people get more involved in, having a voice? I know it's a silly question, but
that is the magic question. I think for a lot of residents, they expect I elected a council member or mayor and expect them to represent me as best they can and go do the job. There are others who want to be very involved in the details. There are others who don't pay attention really until it's something that's in their backyard and has gone viral on social media, and then they say, okay, now I'll pay attention. So it's always a challenge to educate all the residents all at once when they're not all interested until a specific project or a certain issue comes into their neighborhood, and then they're paying attention. And we're glad to have them pay attention because this is definitely a community effort. I'm tasked with overseeing a city of making sure that we follow council policy and their vision, but residents don't always understand, and love to have them understand exactly what we understand. There'll be a lot less friction sometimes when we're just mostly implementing state law, and we don't like it either. I mean, my biggest pet peeve with the city is all our bureaucracy. I hate it. I don't even feel like a government employee sometimes because I hate the bureaucracy. But there's a place for it, and a lot of this is mandated on us. So working through all those issues is definitely a challenge. But we'd love to have more of our residents participate in our meetings. So we meet twice a month, and we're currently meeting with a hybrid or virtual environment so they can participate via Zoom and participate in public comment. We post our agendas on usually the Thursday before the next Tuesday's council meeting. And sometimes there's 100+ pages or more of documents to review, but it spells everything out about why staff's recommending something or why the council's asked for something. So we'd love to have everybody work together better and understand, as a community, where are we going, and make sure that we're really protecting the interests of the residents.
Right, I'm sure in that sense it makes your job and the whole council's job a lot easier if residents are more proactive than reactive. And they're
Absolutely. Getting started early in the process as everybody's learning together, why are we implementing a certain policy, why are we recommending a certain project, and then by the time it gets to that hearing at the council level, everyone should be ideally on the same page, and then can understand why certain decisions are being made. But it's also my job to try to clarify and educate residents when they follow up the next day and say, why in the world? What were you guys thinking? And try to educate them on all those things.
And so in a lot of ways, just circling back to kind of your job as a whole, a lot of that is being the middleman between residents and council in that regard. Is that correct?
In a lot of ways, the more the council can understand the issues, they feel free to educate and respond back to the residents directly, and that's what they're elected to do, to represent their constituents. But I help provide information to the council and then also respond directly as needed.
And then, so the meetings right now are hybrid. I'm looking a little bit ahead here. I had heard something that we're going to have a renovation done of the council chamber. Is that accurate?
Yes. So the county health right now has said if you have large public gatherings, you should avoid them. And I don't know that our council meetings would quite qualify for that. I don't know that we'd have every seat filled. But we do have, starting in April, a major capital project happening in the council chambers. Replacing and upgrading the cameras and the microphones. Some of them are coming on 10+ years old. And as you know, running a studio, you got to keep up with the technology and make sure it's working well. So we don't have the greatest high-density camera views and would like to create more options for the residents especially. And there's interest by having, even once we start meeting in person, is to still have some kind of hybrid option where residents can still participate via some virtual means and still be engaged in those council meetings. And I think that's probably here to stay. It's worked really well. Residents can be at home and jump in when they want and get back to their families and other things when they aren't interested in a certain agenda item.
Yeah, something like that really just gives people more opportunities to participate without
Right.
having to drive all the way across town,
Right.
or any sort of factor that might limit their interest.
Correct. Now we had a meeting. Oh, it was probably 9 months ago, maybe 12 months ago, and it was getting close to midnight. And finally, some resident wanted to comment on an agenda item and said, "Hey, you guys are taking so long getting till midnight. I was able to bake 2 cakes or something in the meantime, and waiting for her agenda item to come up." And ideally, we don't keep residents waiting around till midnight, but can get through the business fairly quickly and still get them to participate.
I think it's perfect. Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel? What else would you like people to know about? Just participating and having their voices heard.
I think it's asking questions and sharing their thoughts on certain topics, but also spending the time it takes to really get educated on it. A lot of the staff have been working in these issues for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And sometimes residents pay attention for the first time on something and really don't have the context or understand it. And it's our job to educate and share, hey, this is why. So we'd love to have them participate more in our council meetings or reach out to me or to other staff directly and say, hey, what's going on? And have you guys thought about this? And what about this? A lot of the ideas of things that we have been doing, especially the last 2 years, have come through residents' engagement with their elected officials and engaging with staff. So that's where you've got a good, well-oiled machine working well, where residents, council, staff are all moving in the same direction.
And so that's the key takeaway about local government, is it really does kind of start at the bottom. It is sort of a grassroots thing in a lot of ways.
We will often show an org chart, and it shows the citizens at the top, and then the mayor and council, and then staff. And that's really how a good system works well.
That's great to keep in mind, yeah. So I know one of the other things Brentwood has to look forward to is there's some redistricting getting ready to go on. Did you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Oh, yes. That's a great one. So for the last 4 or 5 months, the city council had designated they wanted a hybrid redistricting commission to help configure the new maps. And so for the last 4 or 5 months, this independent body has met every month and worked through all of the demography of how do we get certain districts that are all balanced with the same number of people approximately. How do we make sure it's not overly representing any one race or ethnicity group, but that it's really balanced districts? And so the Redistricting Commission, early February, narrowed it down to 2 final maps, and that's actually coming to the City Council on March 3rd, and they will have an opportunity to pick one of those 2 maps without alteration, and that will be the new district map for Brentwood for the next 10 years. And we have 2 districts in place now, and because they were elected to those districts, even if those district boundaries are changing with the new maps, they would still continue to represent those districts as outlined at the time, and perhaps even currently, even if there's some overlap or inconsistency. And then so for this fall, we'll have district elections for what will become District 2 and District 4. And then after December, when they're all seated, December 2022, we'll have 4 districts with 4 elected members in those 4 districts. And then we'll repeat that every 2 years with 2 districts coming on, 2 districts coming off, and moving forward from there.
And so if I'm a constituent, I wanted to reach out to one of my council members on paper rather than emailing, the whole council, I would instead reach out to the person in charge of my district.
Oh, yes. We get quite a few emails to the full council. One of the unintended consequences is I often then get 2 or 3 emails from individual council members saying, how do I respond? And now I've got 2 or 3 extra emails to respond to. If they want to email their district member directly, or they can email me directly, or even the mayor directly, and then we can get back to those residents in a more direct manner as well. So we'll respond however they want to reach out to the city. City Hall is now open again after having closed during the Omicron surge. So we're available in person, phone, email. If knowing what I now know as a city manager, if I was a resident, not knowing anything else, I would contact the city manager or the director of the issue that I have directly, and they'll get the latest update. But our council represents those members, and the council loves to also know what are the issues of the residents, and they need to know those things too. So however they want to reach out to all 5 or to their member or to staff directly, we'll get them an answer, and usually the same day.
That's great. And so I've got one last question for you.
Sure.
I'm a blank slate. I'm someone who's never even heard the word politics before, but I suddenly want to get involved after hearing this conversation. how do I learn, what's going on in town? That's the best way to educate myself.
Well, we're working on a couple initiatives to try to do a little better about our transparency and how do we tell our story a little better. Doing this podcast is one way, but we are refreshing our website. That should be a little easier to navigate. That should come out probably closer to April. We are relaunching our newsletter that we did a few editions early last summer, and with some shortages of resource and personnel, we had to put on hold, but relaunch that in the next month. We try to engage with social media, and that only hits a certain segment sometimes, or at least an active segment. We'd like to see if we can get out more in the community and do these kind of podcasts or these kind of invitations where you come and see how we operate as an executive team and the decisions that we're working through, open Q&A, and give them a better sense of the different projects, updates that they're looking for. Some residents are interested in a project update, right? And another resident's interested in something else. So when we have to address the whole community, how do we cater to what their direct interest is? And there isn't really a way to do that best without engaging them directly. And we're willing to do that as well. So politics, one of the things that maybe just prompted is I think some residents feel like they get frustrated with national politics, and they try to bring those national political issues to the local government when our objective is to focus on water, sewer, streets, bringing jobs here, addressing your immediate needs. And sometimes those things get conflated and sometimes frustrating because we can't do a whole lot about certain national topics sometimes. But that's increasingly becoming a local issue. And I think there's a famous quote by somebody that all politics are local in the end. And that is absolutely true even here in Brentwood. So we'll work through whatever the issue is and try to keep everybody happy.
I've got an idea to pitch for you for the transparency. Field trips for adults to City Hall.
Ooh, there you go. With a lollipop at the end?
Oh, if it's lollipop, jelly beans, whatever you got for me,
Sure.
I'll be there 3 times.
Oh, we've done some great tours with schools and other things, and then all on shutdown with the pandemic. So we're looking forward to doing a lot more of that. But an adult tour, would love to do it.
I think it'd be great. Don't let kids have all the fun.
Love to do it. I've been in communities where we had even citizen academies, and you have 30 different residents that sign up, and they get 2 or 3 week course on a little bit of everything about City Hall. Very instructive because now you have some new, I don't want to say allies, but people that now understand why we have the policies and procedures and bureaucracy that we have sometimes, and can help speak up as ambassadors in a way on behalf of the city sometimes. So
Sure.
That's something we'd love to visit with and do.
Oh, you can have that idea for free. Just make sure it's called Jake Menez's Tour
There
of
you
the
go.
City.
There you go.
But no, other than that, I think, like I said, I think it's been kind of a dense conversation, which is great. A lot of information. Was there anything you felt that we missed out on that you wanted to cover?
No, but we should probably plan to do this again. There's going to be more things that come up and the hot topics of whatever the day is, and be glad to help talk about those things.
Yeah, it'd be perfect. I think just having that extra layer of transparency, like
Sure.
you were saying, just really helps. But with that in mind, then, I think that's all I've got for today. Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much for taking
this
some time
was
out of your
fun.
busy day, out of your
Thank you.
emails.
Appreciate it. This was great.
And as for you listeners, thanks for tuning in once again to Clocked In with the Press. If you're interested in hearing more stories, you can do so on our website or by finding us on Facebook at thepress.net or on Twitter and Instagram at PressClockedIn. Questions, comments, compliments, email them to jake@brentwoodpress.com. Until next time, this is Jake Menez, clocking out.